All right, what's up, YouTube? I had a little bit of an off-stream league that I wanted to post the matches from with some five-color domain zoo, a deck that we've kind of played slight variations of on stream. And when I say variations, I mean like not this at all. We threw Death Shadows in here. So I was kind of looking at playing a league with just straight up a list that I found. This list is from Black Belt 34 off YouTube. And I'll get to like some of the variations of this list from some of the more traditional lists. But we'll just start with the main deck. A lot of the staples for these Domain Zoo decks with cards like 4 Ragavan, 4 Stubborn Denial, 4 Territorial Kavu, 4 Tribal Flames, 4 Leyline Binding, 4 Scion of Draco, and then like 4 Lightning Bolt, some number of Territorial, or not Territorial Kavu, Wild Nikotl, Neshoba Brawler. Some of the flex spots, 2 copies of Minor Misstep. The new for XL will be 1 Mental Misstep-ish, or Fixed Misstep, whatever we want to call it. Just 1 blue, counter target spell with mana value 1 or less. 3 copies of Neshoba Brawler instead of like 4 or 4 plus any Goy for whatever. Why they went down on 2-drop threats, I'm not sure, but I'm guessing just to test out things like Minor Misstep. Otherwise, the only other flex spot is 1 copy of Miglos. No idea how to pronounce it, so we're going with Miglos. Maze Crusher. 1 in a red and a green for a 4/4. ETB with 5 oil counters. You can pay 1, remove an oil counter, gains Vigilance and Menace. Pay 2, remove 2 oil counters. It gets +2/+2. Pay 3, remove 3 oil counters, and blow up an artifact or an enchantment. So really good to help you fight through like Blood Moons and things. You can play it with just your basic forest. You can activate it for just red to blow up Blood Moon. Also good against like opposing Leyline Bindings, things like that. So we'll see how that goes. In the sideboard, 2 copies of Rest in Peace for the Grave decks. 2 Chained to the Rocks, which is one of the test cards that Black Belt was trying out. Really good against decks like Scam and mURktide that don't have good ways of interacting with enchantments. So if you haven't seen this card before, you enchant a mountain you control, and you essentially O-ring a creature until that mountain leaves the battlefield, or until Chain to the Rocks leaves the battlefield. So if they blow up the mountain, it goes away. If they blow up the Chain to the Rocks, they get the creature back, whatever. But with decks like mURktide, their only real way of interacting with enchantments is either counter it, which this is 1 mana. It's often going to be mana efficient. If it's trading up against a counterspell or an Archmage's Charm, something like that. But if they don't counter it, then they're going to have like a Brazen Borrower to bounce it, in which case you just replay it and steal their thing again. Other than that, 2 copies of Flusterstorm for the Cascade stuff, 2 Terra Sunder, a Veil of Summer, 2 Natural State, a Teferi Time Reveler, 2 Hidetsugu Consumes All, and Giganta is our companion of choice. So let's go ahead and start going through a couple of these matches. Just don't mind me if I'm taking bites of my sandwich between takes. All right, match number 1. We're on the draw. Opening hand is fine. We've got a 1-drop threat, which is always good. Whole lot of interaction. If we are against something slower, then this Wild Nikotl might get in a couple shots. If we do need to clear out the way, we are like playing out a Nikotl on 1, getting our forest, forest for Nikotl, we can get a like Sacred Foundry or something to get Plains and Mountain for Nikotl to attack for 3 on turn 2. So we're looking at attacking for 3 with like Leyline Binding active. And then we can Tribal Flames for 5 as soon as turn 3. We could like Breeding Pool into fetch up Mardu Triome, but we don't really need like second single green or blue for anything, so we're probably just going to be getting a Sacred Foundry off this. It also just depends on what we're up against. So opponent mole's pretty deep. Sigarda's Aid, so Hammertime. Let's get down our Wild Nikotl. It really doesn't matter if I play this out as a 1-1 or a 2-2. I guess that's a lie. If my opponent plays out a what's it called? Haste Dude Ginger Brute, then if I'd played out Nikotl as a 2-2, I could block, but I'm probably not blocking a Ginger Brute regardless of what happens. Alright, so we got to remember they are on a mold of 5. Attack first. Attacking before I fetch, so if my opponent chooses to block, I can fetch up a Sacred Foundry and eat the Stoneforge, but they choose not to block. They also got a hammer off, so I want to make sure that I'm firing off one of these removal spells like now. I don't want to get into a situation where my opponent like goes for a hammer and then I fire off a removal spell. They have a second hammer, or if I fire off Leyline Binding and they have a Blacksmith skill. So instead, we're just going to take a lot of the guesswork out of the equation. Another bite. All right, Pure Steel Paladin's fine. Getting a little land flooded. Go ahead and just kill that off. I kind of want to save the Leyline Binding because I know they have a hammer. So Leyline Binding is going to allow me to snag something even if it's been strapped up with a hammer. So attack, get down Kavu. Opponent just goes ahead and straps up this Giver. Alright, so at any point there, I could have like responded to the hammer with a Leyline Binding and targeted the Sigarda's Aid or the Giver of Runes, something like that. I just want to point out this sequencing because it's important. I could go to respond to one of those things, and if my opponent doesn't have anything in their last 2 cards, then great. I steal a Sigarda's Aid, whatever, they keep a Giver, or I exile the Giver, they have a hammer sitting around. But if they have a Blacksmith skill, then I not necessarily lose to that, but I'm in a really bad position against that, regardless of whether I Leyline Binding in response to something, because they can Blacksmith skill the Sigarda's Aid, the hammer, whatever, to give it hexproof. So I put myself in a rough spot against Blacksmith skill, regardless of when I cast this Leyline Binding. But if I cast the Binding now, I also open myself up to Spell Pierce. And I can afford to go to my turn because I lose to the same things. I still lose the blacksmith skill. I can't stop that. But now I don't lose to spell pierce. And I also have that backdoor chance of maybe untapping and drawing like a stubborn denial or a second leyline binding. And that actually lets me beat blacksmith skill. So I think realistically there's basically no reason to fire off this leyline binding on their turn if it doesn't actually change anything. There you go. So now we get to beat the spell pierce because we didn't fire off the leyline binding on their turn. Attack in, discard whatever. We're definitely not going to show them Miglos. I know the game's over, but I'd rather have that one in my back pocket. Sideboarding. So, I'm still pretty new to this deck. If you have suggestions on where I'm sideboarding incorrectly, please, please, please leave a comment down below. Let me know. On the draw against Hammertime, especially on the draw, Ragavan's a lot worse. They could have anything from Esper Sentinel, Memnite, Gingerbrute, Stoneforge, what's his name? Sanctifier on Vec, anything like that that could just stand in front of it. And then I boarded out a Wild Nikotl because I was boarding in the 2 copies of Hidetsugu. Chain to the Rocks, I was on the fence about. I feel like I want Chain to the Rocks. It's a good answer for Sanctifier, for a big construct, whatever. But I'm really unsure about bringing in Chain to the Rocks when I'm also bringing in Hidetsugu. Perhaps it's worth it just to have both. I don't know. At the moment, I was leaning more towards like Hidetsugu being more important. So I was still, like I said, on the fence about Chain to the Rocks. But I took out a stub, a Wild Nikotl for Ragavan, brought in 2 Natural State, 2 Hidetsugu, and 2 Terra Sunder. So again, if you think my decision making was wrong, if I need to bring in Chain to the Rocks as well and just accept the Nombo, let me know. Ooh. It's a very, very interactive hand, but very, very slow mana. Obviously, I would like to be able to cast like Nikotl on 1, Bolt on 2, but I can't. Last bite getting to me. I think the hand is interactive enough to where I want to keep it, despite the slow mana. I just have to sequence kind of correctly. Foreshadowing. Alright, so opponent's got turn 1 8 again. Stubborn Denial. Not that great. So I had a decision here, and I don't know if honestly if it's right or wrong or what. So option number 1 is play out the Savai Triome so that I can have access to Bolt next turn. Option number 2 is play out the Zagoth Triome. So if I find another land, I have access to Terra Sunder. I ended up leaning for the Zagoth Triome because of the Sigarda's aid. I figured if my opponent has like turn 2 1-drop plus hammer, Bolt doesn't do anything for me. I need to have the green mana for Terra Sunder. So I decided to lead with that. And of course, they don't have a 1-drop plus a hammer. So now I've drawn this breeding pool, and I just have to hold up Terra Sunder. I can't stop my opponent from putting a hammer into play with Stubborn Denial. So all I can really do is rely on trying to Terra Sunder to get rid of a target somewhere. They don't go for Fire Up the Ink Moth. So I'm just going to try to Terra Sunder the Sigarda's Aid, and they've got the Blacksmith skill. So taking a big hit. And then we get super punished for drawing the Leyline Binding on the turn. We got to play this Tap Savai Triome. But ultimately, we took a gamble on being able to interact on that turn 2. Didn't work out that way. So we do get to Stubborn Denial Shadow Spear here, so we're not dead. Get rid of Stoneforge. And then they just have a Pure Steel. So opponent kind of had the nuts against us, like double Pure Steel, or double Stoneforge Mystic, the Sigarda's Aid, the Pure Steel, the Blacksmith skill. I think that's one of those, like, we're not going to win this game regardless of sequencing. But in hindsight, I think maybe I should have just played the Savai Triumph first to try to take advantage of the lightning bolts and stuff. Like, just recognizing that Terra Sunder might be my better piece of interaction, but I've got more red things in hand, and I need to use those. Now, obviously, if I knew I was drawing the breeding pool, then Savai Triumph would have been like the no-brainer on turn 1 because I would have had access to the green on turn 2 anyway. But obviously, I don't know that I'm drawing the breeding pool. So I have to make that turn 1 decision without that information. Don't think I didn't do any changing between games 2 and 3 sideboarding. This hand's pretty solid. We get like turn 1 Nicodle, turn 2 Brawler, turn 3 Tribal Flames or Dramoka's Command or something. We do have to be a little bit careful that Steam Vents does not allow us to cast Dramoka's Command. So if we do go for like Temple Garden, Wild Nicodle, or something, turn 2 Steam Vents Neshoba Brawler, then turn 3 we're going to basically have to Tribal Flames and play a Tap Savai Triome. But the important part is this is just a very proactive hand. So one of the reasons I'm getting Temple Garden here, I could get like Overgrown Tomb or something. But Temple Garden like allows me to cast a Leyline Binding if I top deck one. I can't Dramoka's Command, but I do kind of want the white since I've got, like I said, Leyline Binding and stuff like that. So turn 3 Sigarda's Aid, 3 straight games. Get in with Nicodle. Here we're just going to be mana efficient, get the Brawler down. Got it strapped up Esper Sentinel. So, of course, we just naturally top deck the Leyline Binding. Little fortunate there. So Stoneforge should go get another hammer. Be really good if we just top decked more Leyline Bindings, right? That'd be crazy. Now I just get to attack for 8, put you down to 1, Tribal Flames you for lethal, and there we go. So obviously a little bit of luck there on the draws. If we didn't find those, we're in a bit of a predicament. Like, we can always Dromoka's Command and get them to sack the Sigarda's Aid, but that doesn't deal with the threat that's already on board. So more than likely, we're just going to have to, like, attack in, stack a dude, play out the Wild Nicodle, probably take a hit, untap, attack in, maybe Dromoka's Command or Tribal Flame, something like that. We're just going to have to play to go around the big hammered up creature. But because we drew the Leyline Bindings, we kind of get away with it for free. So on to match number 2. Win the die roll. Always love to see a 1 die roll in Modern. Reveal our Pokemon. Good opening hand. We've got turn 1 Ragavan. Turn 2, maybe clear out the way with Tribal Flames. This is one of the situations where, like, I need to get better about early turn sequencing with this deck. So I'll show you where I kind of mess up here. You see it? See that choice I made to get Steam Vents? That was a mess up. Let me tell you why. I could get Sacred Foundry and play out the Ragavan, because I can get Breeding Pool off Windswept Heath, have Overgrown Tomb, or I can get Savai Triome and have all 5 colors. The second being the more important one here, because if I play out this Ragavan on 1, and I'm kind of expecting the Ragavan to just not live, but if the Ragavan does live and it hits my opponent, then I can, if I have Sacred Foundry, I can fetch out a tapped Savai Triome, or not Savai, tapped Zagoth Triome, the Sultai Triome, and use the Sacred Foundry and the Treasure Token to play the Scion on turn 2. But now I can't because I got Steam Vents. So opponent reveals a Lotus Bloom. Like, one of the things that I kind of messed up there, not only the fetch choices, but I was thinking for whatever reason that Scion of Draco math was like Leyline Binding math, where if I had 4 land types, where Leyline Binding would be 2, for whatever reason, I was thinking, oh, Scion's 2 mana with 5 land types, so it's 3 mana with 4 land types. No, it's 4 mana with 4 land types, 6 mana with 3, 8 with 2, 10 with 1, 12 with no basic land types. And so I was thinking, like, okay, I hit and I just play, like, shock in land, play Scion of Draco. Then realized my math mistake, like, as I'm obviously fetching away or sacking my treasure token. So, absolutely on me there. Like, once I got the Steam Vents, I just gave up my ability to play the turn 2 Scion. But I just was not thinking about the progression there. But now we can play a Scion. We are up against what we're assuming is Tameshi combo, because our opponent did suspend a Lotus Bloom. And Eladamri's Call pretty much confirms it, especially after they actually get Tameshi. If you haven't seen this combo before, it's a little out there. So Tameshi, Reality Architect, 2 and a blue for a 2/3 Moonfolk Wizard from the new Kamigawa set. Whenever 1 or more non-creature permanents are returned to hand, draw a card. This ability triggers only once each turn. X and white, return a land you control to its owner's hand. Return target artifact or enchantment card with mana value X or less from the graveyard to the battlefield. Activate only as a sorcery. So, what you do is you get a Lotus Bloom in play in the graveyard, doesn't matter. You play Tameshi, pay a white, bounce a land you control, doesn't matter what land. Get back your Lotus Bloom, sack your Lotus Bloom for 3, we'll just say white to cover the white at this point. Use that white, bounce another land, get back Lotus Bloom, sack it again. You're up to 5 white at this point. Use 1, sack the Lotus Bloom, use 1, get back the Lotus Bloom again, sack it, repeat for however many lands you've gotten to play, and then you play Cultivator Colossus that comes in with all that floating mana, puts all your lands back into play, draws more cards. You can keep using Tameshi after that, assuming you've floated more than the cost of the Colossus. Start picking up those lands that Colossus puts down again, floating more mana. Eventually, play another Colossus, put all your lands back down. And then I think the payoff, once it's all done, is you float enough mana for the green finale of Devastation, and you pay X equals 10 or whatever. So you tutor up another Colossus, whatever you want, and you put like 10 1/1 counters on your dudes and they gain haste and you just bash in. So kind of out there. It's a cool little combo. It's actually a lot harder to disrupt than you think it is. Mainly because this second ability is so cheap. So if you're not holding up instant speed interaction for it, then it can be pretty problematic. So all we're hoping is to like get through this attack, and the next turn we can double Leyline Binding, kind of deal with Tameshi if we need to. So they Besage our Scion, which is fine. Doesn't actually change our clock, because we still need to hit our opponent next turn, and then Tribal Flames. So they're going to Lotus Bloom. I'm going to go ahead and Leyline Binding the Bloom on their upkeep. Mainly because if they go for a Tameshi now, like they have land, Tameshi, 1 white to return Lotus Bloom, I'm hoping that I can just Leyline Binding the Tameshi with the Lotus Bloom or with the activation on the stack, and they can't do enough with that 3 mana to keep me from killing them or to actually kill me. So Goblin Engineer for another Lotus Bloom. I don't get the Triome there because I would actually not mind drawing the Triome since I have plenty of mana to just cycle it away. But we draw a Lightning Bolt. I need the Tribal Flames to present lethal with my guys. So I'm just going to throw the Lightning Bolt to the Goblin Engineer. Attack them. I really want to keep hold of the Leyline Binding just in case. But Tribal Flames is going to finish it off there. On to game 2. Sideboarding against Tameshi. So I brought in 2 copies of Flusterstorm and 2 Rest in Peace. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2 Flusterstorm, 2 Rest in Peace, and 2 Terra Sunder. So I brought in the Flusterstorms to help fight over like Eladamri's Call. They often have things like Prismatic Ending to kind of interact with. So Flusterstorm helps fight over those. Fights over Finale if they're using it to like go get something. Go get like a Dryad or whatever. Brought in the 2 Terra Sunders because they hit not only like Lotus Bloom, you can kick it and hit Tameshi. You can kick it and hit Cultivator Colossus. I saw Leyline Binding out of their deck. It hits that. And then the 2 Rest in Peace. If you exile the Lotus Blooms and they can't actually combo off with Tameshi, they can just use a Lotus Bloom to or use Tameshi to pick up a land, draw a card. But they can't go crazy with the mana production. Boarded out. Couple minor missteps because they're not doing anything at 1 mana. Couple Nacatls coming out, mainly because I just wanted to be bigger on the threat side. I like Nacatl, but I'm on the draw. I really need to get bigger pressure, if that makes any sense. I guess it doesn't really make a ton of sense, does it? Maybe I should have kept Nacatl in. Boarded out Miglos because I thought it was too slow on the draw. And then Dramoka's Command. I could use it as a fight spell. Could use it to deal with the Leyline Binding. But I think the card overall, if they don't have exactly Tameshi, which they're probably not playing until they're ready to combo off, in which case this is 2 mana where all of my other answers are 1 for Tameshi itself. And the sack and enchantment side, I think, is only relevant if they have Tameshi. Or not Tameshi, Leyline Binding. You know what I mean. Okay, so this is a very proactive hand. Always happy to see. So you can have Forest Nacatl on 1, Sacred Foundry, Territorial Kavu on 2, or Steam Vents Kavu on 2. I guess Steam Vents Kavu attacks for 2. And then this could get... Don't have a black... Don't have a Godless Shrine. So just have to get a Triome off that. That's fine. Right. Stubborn Anal is not terrible. Did suspend double Lotus Bloom turn 1. So we're missing black and blue, so I can get Zagoth Triome off this to get that online. Paying attention to opponent's mana. They've got these 2 Lotus Blooms coming off suspend next turn. They have not hit a land drop. I don't really need more pressure at the moment. So I think I'm just going to rest in peace to stop combo and fight over one of these Lotus Blooms. Just really limit the mana they have available. And they decide to just go ahead and scoop it up. If they did go for a Tameshi here, they couldn't do anything with it. They could pay 1, pick up their land, draw a card, replay it. But that's not actually helping them win the game. So the power of pressure. On to match 3. And we've got Nathan of the Gilt Leaf, one of the players up near the top of the Modern Trophy board right now. I know plays a lot of Amulet Titan. So that's kind of what I'm expecting to see here. One of the things I'm very much learning about this deck is you really cannot afford to keep 1-landers. It's not like Shadow where you've got Ragavan, Darcy, Bauble, maybe Consider, maybe Street Wraith, something like that, where you can draw out of 1-landers and find the second one. Here, you're 21 lands with really no draw power. So we're just going to go ahead and ship that back real quick. This is Not great, but it's better. Like, we've got turn 1 Ragavan, turn 2 Kavu. Maybe find another piece of interaction. Throw back a lightning bolt. Dramoka's command can be used to make them sack a what's it called? Urza Saga. If that ends up being relevant. Let's just get down Ragavan. Cavern of Souls is fine. So they play Arboreal Grazer and don't put in a land, which would lead me to assume that they've got a bounce land in hand. Like, there's not really a reason to put in a bounce land with the Grazer, make 2 mana, pick the bounce land back up if you don't have like a 3-drop to play. If you have a 3-drop, then yeah, you absolutely do it. But the play, at least to me, would lead me to believe they've got a bounce land and maybe like a Titan or a Summoner's Pact in hand. But there's the bounce land. Dryad. We get the always fun play here of we'll attack, discard, whatever, draw. We already know we have the Dramoka's command, so we're just going to make you sack the enchantment, sack the Dryad. I'm going to put a counter on the Kavu, or not the Kavu, the Ragavan here, kind of divide up power. Also makes it so that if they play another Arboreal Grazer, then Ragavan can just attack into it without having to worry about getting indefinitely chump blocked. All right, and then when they play a land, pass, then we know we've got plenty of burn wrapped up to kill, so let's go ahead and get that. Again, proactivity, key in Modern. Sideboarding, boarding out the minor missteps. Maybe you want to keep it on the play because you can counter an Amulet, but on the draw, looks really, really bad. Does counter Summoner's Pact, but we still have Stubborn Denial in the deck. And then I boarded out a couple Ragavans and a couple Lightning Bolts. The Ragavans, because of Arboreal Grazer, I really don't want to spend like a Leyline Binding or a Tribal Flames or something just hitting an Arboreal Grazer. Just to try to clear the way out for a Ragavan. I'd rather just like have a bigger threat that can attack through Arboreal Grazer. And the 2 Lightning Bolts only kill Grazer. They don't kill Dryad. They don't kill Titan, Colossus, anything like that. The board ends were the 2 copies of Natural State, 2 Terra Sunder, and the 2 Hidetsugu. Especially now with Mycosynth Garden, access to something like EE or Hidetsugu post board becomes a lot more important because they're way, way, way more likely to have multiple amulets in play. Between naturally drawing the amulets, Mycosynth Gardens to copy them, Urza Saga to fetch them up, like, your opponent's going to have multiple amulets more often than not nowadays. It used to be I might bring in an EE if I didn't have anything else, but a lot of the times the amulet players would board out on amulets and go for more of like a value plan with Tireless Tracker or something to that effect. But now they're just way more combo oriented, so that plan goes out the window a little bit. So this is fine. Before I do anything, this might be foreshadowing. I can't remember if this is the... I think this is the one I screwed up the fetching. Yeah, definitely is. So, I've got 2 options here. I could try to get Ragavan down and get like a Steam Vents. I could get a... I don't have a Stomping Ground in the deck. Could get a Steam Vents. Could get a... Do I have a Blood Crypt? Blood Crypt doesn't really matter because I don't have... or because I have Savai Triome in hand. Yeah, no Blood Crypt. I could get Overgrown Tomb and get down Wild Nicodle, which is what I should have done. I should have just said, like, you know, Ragavan doesn't really matter here. Ragavan's good, obviously, but I kind of thought, okay, I'll get red-white so I can get down Ragavan. I can have Leyline Binding up. And it was just a terrible, terrible, terrible fetch decision on my part. I should have gotten, I think, Overgrown Tomb or Temple Garden, either one of those, and gotten down Wild Nicodle this turn so that next turn I could just play Tap Savai Triome, attack for 3, play a second 3/3, and then untap and have like Leyline Binding active or Dramoka's Command active. But I definitely believe I overvalued the Ragavan here. Like, even if I get to attack my opponent, I really don't think this this matters a lot here. Yeah, especially when it's just bounce land, double Amulet. There's kind of a funny moment in a second here that we'll go over. So my opponent did pact for this Titan. They're going to explore and pass. So I had an opportunity there if I drew a third land to be able to Leyline Binding this Titan, and my opponent essentially would have had to take this next turn off. I hit for 5. Maybe I like hit for 5, play Kavu. They take the turn off. I untap, hit for 9 or 10 maybe, and then have Tribal Flames for lethal. But because I missed the land drop, I decided just like attack in case maybe they block the Wild Nicodle instead of the Ragavan, and I can Tribal Flames the Primeval Titan down. But they don't, so I'm just kind of stuck doing nothing. And if I had fetched correctly turn 1 and played the Wild Nicodle, then I would have been able to Leyline Binding the Primeval Titan there. Could have also played the Kavu there. If I had fetched correctly, I mean. So it all kind of comes down to like, hey, you idiot, fetch correctly. Not that hard. And yeah, so nothing going on. Just overvaluing Ragavan there. So completely on me. But we do get to go to game 3 on the play. Always love being on the play a lot more than the draw. Shocker, I know. On the play, I brought back in the 2 Ragavan over 2 Stubborn Denial, just to be way more out on the front foot. Like, Ragavan on the draw into Arboreal Grazer is horrendous. Ragavan on the play is a little bit better, because at least if you spend a spell getting rid of the Arboreal Grazer, you can pick that mana back up with a Ragavan hit. And is slow but interactive. Play out Kavu. If our opponent does have something good here, we could have been in a little bit of trouble, but it would have to be like bounce land, Dryad, something else, and we still just get to untap and have like Leyline Binding and a 5/5 attacking. So we're just going to ditch the Stubborn Denial. I'm planning on like Leyline Binding every Amulet I can get my hands on. So Stubborn Denial a lot less effective if they don't have the mana to really take advantage of like summoners packs and stuff. So opponent decides to make a construct. And this is where things look pretty good for us. So I know I don't want to ditch any of these cards. We just attack in. Our Kavu's got First Strike and Trample because of the Scion, so we know we're getting through some damage. And then we're just going to tear asunder the Urza Saga, Leyline Binding the Amulet, and say good luck. Your basic forest versus our 5/5 First Strike Trampler, 4/4 Flyer, and 2 mana 5 damage burn spell in hand. So, Summoner's Pact for a Grazer, you got it. Second Summoner's Pact for another Grazer, love to see it. So, yeah, our opponent was ready to go off if we didn't deal with those amulets. Just attack in. I already know they can't pay for the Summoner's Pack, so I could just pass the turn. But, and this is one of those times that I think it's important to not disrupt your own gameplay just because of, like, what's going on. And what I mean by that is I know that my opponent is dead to the Summoner's Pack triggers. They can't pay for both packs. I do not know. This could be the one Amulet Titan player in the history of Amulet Titan players that has decided to jam a couple copies of like Angel's Grace in their deck for just such an occasion. I don't know. I can afford to not necessarily play around it, but put myself in a significantly better position if they do have it by just going through my turn as I normally would. Instead of just saying, like, yeah, draw land, go, pay for Pact. Because what if they do? What if they do have an Angel's Grace and they pay for Pact and then they have, like, mana left to do something else? How did I just, like, throw that game away for just because I was too lazy to go about my turn as normal? So we drew Hidetsugu off the Flooded Strand. We discarded it. Obviously, if we had that pre-combat, we would have just cast it, get rid of the Grazer's attack for lethal. But we didn't. So we're going to attack in. And we are just passing the turn because, again, I could fire off the Tribal Flames and put them down to 1. Doesn't do me any good if they just have, like, Angel's Grace plus do something on their turn. So I might as well save this Tribal Flames for my turn. It's so minor, but I feel like there's a lot of times people snatch defeat from the jaws of victory because they take that approach of just like, oh, there's nothing they can have. They're dead. Pass the turn. And then something they didn't expect happens because you just don't know. So if you can afford to not give up anything, like me attacking there does not give up anything on my side. Like, yeah, if they have, I don't know, untap Angel's Grace, Amulet, Bounce Land, Arboreal Grazer, put Bounce Land back in, Titan, haste it up, attack in, double strike it, get another Titan, whatever, like something just ungodly nutty like that in their 5 cards, then sure, I should have held back a blocker and I died because of it. But if they don't have that, then I'm not giving up any percentage points by just attacking, making them block, playing out my turn, make their board state worse, make it so that they can't just double jump block next turn if they somehow live. See what I mean? Does that make any sense? But either way, can't pay for Pact, so they die. But I absolutely respect OP for going out on their own terms with the double Pact for double Dryad or double Arboreal Grazer. Thought that was S tier. All right, so 3-0. Round number 4. Win a die roll. Love to see it. Again, one lander, can't afford to keep it, especially a one lander with no red mana. These like double Ragavan. Much better. Throw back one of these extra lands. We've got like Zagoth Triome and Sacred Foundry gives us 5 land types for Scion of Draco. Do have to remember your like fetch and shock pairings, or basic land pairings, I guess you should say. So, like, Zagoth Triome is the Sultai Triome, pairs with Sacred Foundry for 5. Savai Triome is the Mardu Triome, pairs with Breeding Pool for all 5 on turn 2. If you're running, like, the Naiad Triome or something, you'd pair that with a Watery Grave for all 5. I think I've seen some lists with the Grixis Triome, I want to say. The Xander's Lounge, is that the name of it? But either way, it pairs with Temple Garden for all 5. And then maybe you'll see somebody with the Jun Triome. That one, Zeator's Proving Ground pairs with Hallowed Fountain. But just good to know. And then we're just going to play our tap Zagoth Triumph so we can turn 2 Scion. Steam Vents pass, no companion. So I'm assuming mURktide. Scion of Draco should be a pretty safe play. Can't be spell pierced, can't be spell snared. They can't Unholy Heat or bolt it into turn. It stands in the way of Ragavan Dash or Channeler, Ledger Shredder. So consider flipping over Lightning Bolts. Pretty interesting. My immediate thoughts are either A, my opponent has got a mURktide in hand and wants to get that online as soon as possible, or B, they didn't have a land drop and we're looking pretty aggressively for that. Since they followed it up with Basic Island, I'm really leaning towards they didn't have a land drop. Because I think if you had another red-blue source, you would have played that out here instead of the Basic Island. So they could have a mURktide, which would be pretty scary. I can Tribal Flames plus bolt down the mURktide, but when my opponent's about to be going down to 10 and I've got 8 points of burn wrapped up, like, I really don't want to waste the burn spells on a mURktide. Get Breeding Pool instead of the Triome there because I've got all these lands, and I would like to be able to convert a Triome that I draw into another card. No Spell Snare is very nice. They also haven't seen a fetch land, so they don't have Delirium yet. We've only got instant, sorcery, and artifact. No creature, no land. Ledger Shredder. Alright, so they have a land to ditch for the Unholy Heat. Get to kill the Kavu. They didn't spell snare the Kavu, so I'm kind of assuming that they've got a spell pierce. So I don't want to fire off this bolt into turn and put myself in a position where they can just spell pierce that. I'd rather untap, play my 5th land, and then I can play both of my burn spells and pay for spell pierce. But then they just go for Unholy Heat the Scion, so cool. Here's double burn spells at your face. And that's game 1. Game number 2. All right, so sideboarding against mURktide. On the draw, took out a bunch of Ragavans because between their Ragavans, Darcy, and Holy Heat, Lightning Bolt, Ledger Shredder, they just got a lot of ways to stand in front of mURktide or stand in front of Ragavan. Then I took out a couple Neshoba Brawlers on the draw because of Lightning Bolt. Just having a 2-mana thing die to a 1-mana removal spell is pretty awkward. Boarded in the 2 copies. Make sure I got this right before I say anything. The 2 copies of Chained to the Rocks. This is like one of the matchups that we really want to check it out for. 2 copies of Rest in Peace and a Teferi Time Reveler. So Teferi not only invalidates like their counter magic, but being able to come down, bounce a mURktide, or bounce like a Ledger Shredder with some counters is a huge, huge tempo swing. It can often allow you to get back into the game. Could board in Natural State for like Blood Moon. Probably should board in Tear Asunder in the matchup. I think I could see myself just like dropping. Maybe like the 3rd Brawler and like maybe a Stubborn Denial or something. It felt like I've got a lot of cards that I wouldn't mind in the matchup, and it's just picking and choosing what you want your game plan to be. Like Flusterstorm's really good in the matchup. Tear Asunder's really good. Hidetsugu's really good. But at some point, I kind of have to decide, like, okay, Hidetsugu's really good if they lead off with a bunch of 1-drops and they don't have a counter spell for it and they don't get a mURktide down before Hidetsugu goes off because they see Hidetsugu and immediately know, all right, I've got to play my mURktide now if I've got it, because if not, I'm not going to have a graveyard. Flusterstorm was kind of like this is good on the play when I've got tempo. It's bad on the draw when I'm playing on the back foot. So yeah, another one of those matchups where if you've got thoughts, suggestions, things that are working for you, let me know down below. This is more me just doing a little bit of gut sideboarding. Opening hand's fine. Like we've got some threats, we've got some removal based interaction. We're not dead to a Blood Moon because we can just get a basic forest. All right, so now we've got all our basics covered. Okay, so I could play a Wild Nicottle on turn 1 off of like a basic forest. I really want to get the basic forest with one of these foothills, so I'm not just dead in the water to Blood Moon. But if I play basic forest Wild Nicottle, then all of a sudden it's dead to Unholy Heat without Delirium. I don't like that idea. So I think I'd rather just like lead on Lightning Bolt the Dragon's Rage Channeler, play the Wild Nicottle plus like hold up another Bolt on 2. That way the Nicottle's not just dead to anything under the sun. Then this was a little cheeky because they Mishra's bobbled themselves and they didn't fetch. I'm assuming they want the card on top. So I'm going to go for Bolt on my upkeep with the bobble trigger on the stack. So if they do have like a Spell Pierce and want to save their Darcy, they're going to have to shuffle away that card. If not, we'll just get to tag that. And it looks like the card was important enough to them. So we're just going to get Forest, play out our Nicottle. If they play Blood Moon, we get basic Plains. Get Nicottle back up to a 3/3. We can add Gigantha. And I'm pretty sure they bobbled us with the first bobble, so they know about the basic plains. Or I think it's the basic plains or the flooded strand. One of the two they know about. So spell snare for the brawler. I'm going to wipe out my Nicodles. These are basically full retail Scion and Draco. Gigantha. I'm going to save this Savai Triome because I might want to just cycle it away. Shocking Steam Vents. I'm kind of assuming at this point that they're just like trying to get me to kill them quicker. Like, why would you shock in Steam Vents when you're at 7 life and I've got a 4/4 flyer? All right, so we're just going to get down. Rest in peace. I got a lightning bolt, sure. Now we're protected from mURktide. We're protected from Unholy Heat on Gigantha. Okay. Good draw. Good draw, because this Windswept Heath can get Breeding Pool. So now we've actually got a hard Stubborn Denial up. And I can't think of a lot of better options than countering Expressive Iteration. If they do have like a counter spell here, then it at least taps them off of most of their mana. If they don't have one, then Stubborn Denial is a really good target to hit. And then if they're playing out EE, we know they can't play out EE on 5 to kill Gigantha, which is fine. But if they're playing it out on 2, then I'm kind of just assuming they've got like something in hand that cares about the graveyard. Hope they don't have a lightning bolt, but we're definitely making that attack all day, every day. Dress down, draw a card. Don't need anything relevant. So we get to kill him with a Gigantha. And on to match number 5. 4-0. All right. Match number 5. Faith, our opponent, another trophy leader, or like up there on the trophy leaderboard. I have seen them post about Jun's Saga on Twitter. So I'm thinking it's going to be Jun's Saga. This is very, 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 very important. If you take away anything from this league, take away this piece of advice. Never go into a match. And when I say this, I mean the exception is like open deck list, or hey, I've seen this person playing this exact deck in this one tournament we are currently at. And I'm going to use that information. But in just like a Magic Online league or something like that, never, never, never go into a match assuming what your opponent is playing. Because 2 major reasons. One, if they're not playing that thing, then you very well could have like lost the game before you've even started. A good example of that is I played against Caleb Scherer in one of the recent Modern Challenges. And Caleb, obviously very well known for Storm. And So I had a good opening hand with, I think, Grixis Shadow, expecting Storm, or not expecting Storm. I know Caleb plays a lot of Storm, but I kept a good hand in the blind against anything. And it turns out he was on Hammertime. If he'd been on Storm, my opening hand would have been like pretty bad. I probably would have molded against Storm. But because I didn't assume he was on Storm, I just know he plays a lot of Storm. I just kept like a good, generically open hand, and it worked out very well. Same situation here. I know that my opponents posted a lot about Jund Saga. I am not going to go into this match assuming they're on Jund Saga because I will get absolutely wrecked for that. So, like, this opening hand, not particularly good against Jund Saga. I'm going to keep it. I don't know what they're on. On the play, Scalding Tarn. So, Scalding Tarn, no companion. Pretty well lets me know they're not on Jund Saga. So now I have to think about the options. Obviously, mURktide is one of the prevalent ones. So we're going to lead on a Wild Nicotl here. They could have like a kill spell for the Nicotl, but I'm not stopping the kill spell anyway. Yep. All right, so let's just pass with our foothills up. We can always fetch up a blue source and soft stub something if we need to. So, Xander's Lounge, Sacred Foundry, Mountain, Fable. I'm 99% sure it's some sort of creativity build at this point. All Mountains, Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So definitely countering the Fable. Now we're just looking for a good threat. Not a threat, but we can cycle away the Savai Triome. Teferi's pretty good. Get this out of the way. Scion, good threat. Kavu, also good threat. So I got to take my mana into account here. If I played out the Territorial Kavu this turn, I wouldn't be able to hold up Stubborn Denial. So instead, I'm going to play out the Scion. I've got all 5 of my basic land types. So I can play the Scion for 2, hold up the Stubborn Denial. The next turn, I can play out the Kavu if I want. The issue is I cannot get red. Well, I can't get Sacred Foundry to play out Kavu here, but I can't get another red source and like another blue source if I find another copy of Stubborn Denial or something. All right, so leading on iteration here means they can't play a creativity. They don't have the mana, so I'm just going to try to counter this. Fight over what I can fight over a little bit. Get down Kavu. Flooded Strength can get Sacred Foundry. So this is kind of what I meant. We can get our second red source. I couldn't get a second blue source and have red available. Was not expecting a prismatic ending. I don't think I've seen creativity play prismatic ending in a minute. All right, Ren is fine. Ren ping the Scion, kill it off, sure. So now the question is, do they have a removal spell for the Kavu? Which, once we do the Tribal Flames, it didn't really matter. But there you go. Ping off for lethal game 1. This is a matchup that makes me miss having engineered explosives in the board. But because I saw prismatic ending and like expressive iteration. Mental misstep looks a lot worse to me. If it was like lightning bolt, spell pierce, veil of summer, then misstep would look a lot better. Boarded out a couple of lightning bolts because just straight up spot removal, not very good against the deck. Board out a Ragavan on the draw because like Renin 6. Hidetsugu's maybe one I should consider more since I don't have engineered explosives. But I ended up boarding in 2 copies of Rest in Peace, stop Renin 6, stop if they've got any of the persist cards for Archon. Brought in 2 Fluster Storms to help fight over creativities and any other annoying effects like that. And then brought in the 1 Teferi. Again, really good at making sure that my counter spells resolve and theirs don't. Yeah. It's very slow opening hand. So this would be like turn 1 Forest Nicodle or turn 1 Breeding Pool Nicodle. Turn 2 like Sacred Foundry attack. Turn 3 tap Zagoth Triumph, play Scion, something like that. Not a very exciting hand. Yeah, kind of punted away that fetch decision. I think that was a misclick, but I'm not 100% sure. It might have been I thought I was getting a like I was planning on getting Sacred Foundry next and just kind of like instinctively grabbed it without thinking. Also, probably could have just gone ahead and like bolted the Ren into turn in case I drew another bolt. And I didn't want to tap off bolt here for just such an occasion. My opponent does have a creativity. I want to be able to bolt the token. Fable, a lot worse for me. So Scion gives trample to the Wild Nicodle, but they've just got Leyline Binding. So this is definitely one of those games where our opponent's rollout just fit really well against what we were trying to do. And then our punt for the Sacred Foundry on 1 definitely did not help the issue. So we have to try to kill the Ren or hit the Ren. But as soon as they show Lightning Bolt, game's over. Like, they can now Ren Emblem, any lands, just take out all my threats. We're dead in the water. So, game 3. Don't believe. Took out 1 extra Ragavan. Took out a Rest in Peace. Boarded in the 2 Terra Sunders. Help fight over Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Leyline Binding that we saw there that we didn't see game 1. All right, pretty solid proactive hand. I can get down a Wild Nicodle on 1 and then grow it on 2 before I have to worry about Renin 6. So I'm pretty down for that. Then I have like the ability to get a good threat down on 2. If I find a piece of interaction or a third land, especially a third land, I can get down like a threat and interaction on 3. And then when opponent doesn't have a lightning bolt there on turn 1, then it's kind of like full green light, all systems go. What I'm really hoping for here is actually Fable of the Mirror Breaker. So I can like sack that, kill the token, or put a 1/1 counter on a dude, fight, whatever. Attack first. All right. So we attack first because if they take this trade, that means all I've got to do is like play out Nikotl, hold up Dramoka's command to fight a token in case they go for fetch land creativity. Like the thing this loses to by not main phasing the Dramoka's command to kill the Fable is it loses to my opponent like discarding an Archon here and persisting. Then I can put a counter on the Shoba Brawler, fight the Archon, lose a Wild Nikotl, play out a Scion. Like they go up to 9, I attack down to 6, put a Scion into play, and then I've got a Tribal Flames, and I just have to like find some way to win from there. But if they don't discard an Archon, then this is effectively like game over. Then I'm going to go ahead and fire off the Dramoka's command because I want to have my mana available to Tribal Flames on my turn. The Aether Gust. I think I just put the Wild Nikotl back on top because I'm going to be able to double spell with it. I don't really care if my second spell is Wild Nikotl or Scion. I just want like another thing to do besides Tribal Flames. But now that they have spent their blue mana, I don't have to worry about Tribal Flames not resolving. So if they do have like, let's say they had a Lightning Bolt for Neshoba Brawler, then I would Nikotl and fire off the Tribal Flames just so they couldn't fetch for another Dwarven Mine. But because they took the 5 off Neshoba Brawler, we're just going to go for the lethal burn spell there. So that was the league. It's kind of funny because the cards I wanted to test were like Minor Misstep, Chain to the Rocks, Miglos, and I never ended up casting any of those. So we'll probably be playing this deck on stream a little bit this week. I think it's really, really fun. I want to figure out some of these flex spots. But other than that, I hope y'all can catch one of the live streams going on at twitch.tv/the_control freak. Have the link down below in the description. Otherwise, hope you have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. We'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.